Welcome back to Spectrum Days, the games we played, a new podcast that takes a look at the games we played over 30 years ago. Call it retro or call it nostalgia, these are the games that shaped our lives. My name is Chris and I'm here with my cousin Phil.
Hello.
To discuss the games we remember, the games we loved, how they felt to us at the time, and how they look now. We've got producer John with us, who'll try to keep us on track and sounding all right. So Phil, it's coming up to Halloween. What game have we got for this week?
It is indeed. And in fact, it was John who suggested this when we thought about doing a Halloween special. And he suggested Ghouls N Ghosts, and how right he was to suggest it.
Oh, good. So let me explain a little bit about how this show will work. We'll reminisce about the game, talk from our memories and a few notes. Then, once we've dribbled on for a while through our rose-tinted glasses, we'll take a pause. We'll play the game wherever we can find it. Maybe Phil will have the cartridge, maybe we'll use an emulator, but one way or another, we'll play it. Then we'll come back and record part 2, where we tell you if they really were Spectrum Days or if our memories have failed us, if the game has stood the test of time, or if it's unplayable dribble.
Let's hope not, because we've got to spend several days playing it. and unfortunately, my overriding memory of this game, although it's amazing, it's another one that's really, really hard.
Last week we played R-Type. That was difficult enough.
Yeah, I think this might actually be a common theme. Our age group just is basically remembering arcade games, and this is just another one of those classic arcade games designed to take your money. They just say, right, we've got a load of 10-year-olds who like playing computer games. What should we do? I don't know, let's make them really hard so we get all their money. Where do you remember it from? Come on.
Again, 34 years ago. Very glad we're recording this before I hit 50, which is just down the road. But because already is my memory failing, when I try to drift back in my memories thinking of this game, I'm thinking yet again it was the Commodore Amiga, but it would have been the Amiga or possibly the Megadrive once again. I've got vague memories of playing the game in looking at a TV set that we had connected to the Amiga. I've got vague memories of it being very, very, very difficult and running around with King Arthur, throwing huge swords at people and upgrading armor. So I reckon the Commodore Amiga. What about you, Phil?
Yeah, I think what you're saying actually is probably chiming with the sound in the room as far as everyone else that's listening in, because it's very much like R-Type. If anyone hasn't seen our other or heard our other podcast, then do have a listen. That was the one we did on R-Type. And we found with that it got converted to absolutely everything and was really good on absolutely everything. And actually Ghouls N Ghosts, maybe not quite as much as R-Type, did do very well on all the other formats. So I'm not surprised that you've got sort of amalgamated memories from different systems, probably because you played it on all those systems at one time or another. I know I certainly did, but then that's because I sort of worked in the games industry and second-hand market, so I played it on a lot of different things. But where I remember Ghouls N Ghosts specifically, the place I mainly think of it of is the Megadrive. It was one of the early games on the system, and it was one of the games that we were anticipating. It didn't come out necessarily at launch. I think it came out a few months, I think later on in the year, 1990, on the Megadrive. And it was one of those few games that we saw reviewed first before it coming out. Specifically Mean Machines. A lot of people probably remember the magazine Mean Machines, certainly over here in the UK, where it got 92%. Everyone was extremely excited about it. So that's really why I remember it specifically on the Megadrive, because we were actually looking forward to it, but not exclusively that, but because, of course, it was originally Ghosts and Goblins was the original game, the original arcade game, and Ghouls and Ghosts was the follow up because Ghosts and Goblins did so well. So I think, as far as remembering the series, I probably played Ghost and Goblins, the original one, on the ZX Spectrum, which must have been, I don't know when that one came out, but some time before Ghouls and Ghosts, probably 5 years prior or something on ZX Spectrum, maybe 85, 86, maybe something like that. But yeah, for me, Ghouls and Ghosts has always been synonymous with the Mega Drive. It was done in-house by Sega. Capcom originally made the arcade machine, but Sega obviously got hold of it and did the license and did it themselves and did a blooming good job, and brought it out on the Master System as well. Came out on both of them, and it was a great conversion on both.
Oh, it's out on the Master System as well.
Yeah,
Maybe played it on the Master System.
Yeah, but it was
the
late.
5th.
You see, that was a comparatively late game.
Okay. So I'm seeing here that, October the 5th, 1988 on the Mega Drive.
John's list let us know that it came out on the Spectrum in 88.
In 88 as well. Gosh.
So there we go. That just shows we're nearly 50. They've got no idea what's going on.
Oh, it must have been painful to play on the Spectrum.
Well, no, as I say, that was Ghosts and Goblins. Ghouls and Ghosts. Oh, see, this is going to get very confusing, isn't it? Ghosts and Goblins. Ghosts and Goblins was the one that I played on the Spectrum, which was the original. And,
well, that's what I wonder. I was asking, well, why are we going to speak about Ghouls and Ghosts? Because it's Ghosts and Goblins, which is the one that comes off the top of my head as a name, right? And it's easier to say, but Ghouls and Ghosts. But I'm presuming it was the better game, right? We're talking about it because we think it was better.
Oh, it was. Yeah, I'm sure people would argue with us, but yes, I mean, generally it was a far more improved version. It was actually very, very similar, but it was a great step up. And again, for me, and I think for a lot of people, it sort of underscored how good the Mega Drive was. And you've got to remember, the Mega Drive was coming out when there was zero competition. It was just the Nintendo, the original NES, and then the Mega Drive came out. And how good did Ghouls and Ghosts look and play on the Mega Drive compared to Ghosts and Goblins on the NES? I mean, completely different world. I mean, it's hard for people now who didn't live through that period to realize how good something like Ghouls and Ghosts on the Mega Drive was and how amazing it looked and sounded compared to the NES. It was totally other world. So
I think we should give a bit of a description of the game, just in case. You never know. My son might be listening, 15.
No, he's not.
He's 15.
No, he's not listening.
I must have been... No, well... well, I might force him to listen to it in the car or something. So he's a little bit young. I was 16 then when this came out. When the Ghouls and Ghosts came out on Mega Drive, I was definitely 16. I don't think many 15-year-olds today, unless they're really into retro gaming, are going to know what Ghouls and Ghosts is. So from our memories, we can give a kind of description of what it is. And some people might call it a run and gun.
Yeah, I think it's funny. We probably wouldn't have called it that then. But now, yes, you probably would. It's got the same tropes as a run and gun, as in jumping left to right or running, and you do shoot. There are wet projectile weapons. So yeah, it sort of technically is, but it's so old fashioned. It's the fact you're playing Arthur, the character's called Arthur and he has armor. It doesn't sort of lend itself to run and gun, which sounds a bit more like you've got guns where you haven't got a gun in this. So back then we'd have probably just called it a platformer or as it was, which was an arcade game. We used the word arcade if it was an arcade game. A bit more boring and not very descriptive, but yeah.
Yeah, most likely we would have said arcade game. Yeah, and you do throw an infinite amount of huge swords.
Yeah.
So he's running. You do run left, as Phil said. You run left, right, jump, and fire swords. There are upgrades of armor, and I can remember also that you can lose your armor, and there are moments where your character Arthur runs around in his boxer shorts.
Yes, yes. You sort of have two lives, or the equivalent of a health bar, so you sort of lose a bit of health. But in this sense, yes, you graphically he loses his armor and he's then in the nude, basically. Yeah. So you get two hits. We would have said two hits
Yeah,
back in the day.
and the storyline.
Yeah, it has got a bit of a storyline. Yeah, I believe the princess is called Prin Prin, which didn't sort of get translated, so left that it's a very Japanese game, and she's actually Prin Prin is kidnapped by the devil, I believe. Actually
Ah,
kidnaps her. So yeah, it's very appropriate for Halloween. It's you probably would. Actually, back then, I think the fact that there was so little obvious storyline in games, but the fact that in the UK we weren't even allowed to say ninja in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I suspect have had anyone noticed that it was the devil was in Ghouls and Ghosts, it probably would have got changed, but
well,
it didn't get changed.
if there was what the board, I don't know who. What's the name of the people who have to check the age rating of films and games? But if they ever looked at the game, they would probably never have got off level 1. So I don't think I don't think the devil appears till later on.
I love the
Can you
thought
imagine?
that games makers are making games so hard so they can get a lower rating.
Yeah,
We'll make the first level really nice but hard.
the ratings board. Could you send us some cheats? We need infinite continues. No, even with infinite continues, you're not getting off level 1.
They should have done that with Mortal Kombat. Have no fatalities when you get past the first person, but after that, it's all decapitations and blood. And so, yeah, as far as storyline, I'm afraid it's a fairly typical game trope where you've got a man who is a savior and a woman who's been kidnapped by some nefarious evil person, in this case the devil, and yeah, you have to go and rescue her, which was actually exactly the same in Ghosts and Goblins, or I'm getting so confused now. The first one, it was exactly the same same scenario, although I don't think it was the devil. I think it was some other bad person. His girlfriend Prin Prince, I don't know, she's obviously got a penchant for the bad boys and seems to get taken away by them no matter who it is.
Thinking of the game, it made me think of what in my mind was a modern game, Broforce. Broforce is the culmination of all of these kind of run and gun platform shoot games where you get to play all of our favorite 80s action heroes. McClane from Die Hard. I think Blade is one of the playable characters, Rambo. And it's just like the extreme version of all of these kind of games. So I think the beginnings could possibly be found in Ghosts and Goblins, Ghouls and Ghosts, and then it culminates in Broforce, which is an amazing game if you get the chance to play it. And I was thinking, oh yeah, Broforce. That game's already 9-10 years old. I don't know if that counts as retro already. Playing, it's a game that looks back. It's obviously playing on that retroness, but I can't believe that I probably played Broforce 9 years ago. So time is moving fast.
We'll give our contact details at the end, and for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, I'd love you to argue in the comments about what retro is. I'd love that to be cleared up once and for all. What on earth is retro? What is it?
Well, Phil and I are looking forward to the vintage days when we can start talking about vintage gaming. That's next year. We can, I think, officially start talking about vintage gaming.
Next year, is that when you get your bus pass?
Well, there's some Spectrum games, Manic Miner, Horace Goes Skiing. Are they officially classified as vintage next year?
I think so. I think now Sir Clive Sinclair's dead. I think it automatically became vintage, didn't it?
Yeah. I think Horace Goes Skiing was vintage the day it was.
Look, if you can buy a
recorded onto tape,
if you can buy a vintage iPod Shuffle, then I think Sinclair stuff's probably vintage, isn't it?
So do you own Ghouls and Ghosts on physical cartridge?
Now, well, see, this is the funny thing when because obviously off camera and off microphone, we obviously do discuss what we're going to do, and as John suggested, Ghouls and Ghosts, I did, as I say, immediately think of the Megadrive, and that's certainly where I used to have it. But no, it's not one that I've got. I do believe I might possibly have Super Ghouls and Ghosts, possibly, but that's another sort of game, really. But Ghouls and Ghosts, no. I do collect, as would probably be mentioned throughout all these different podcasts, and anyone who saw our R-Type one will see that I had R-Type nice boxed on the Master System. I do try and get some boxed stuff, and if I do buy it boxed, if it isn't something I had from back in the day, if it's something I'm buying now, I tend to buy it complete. I like to have it complete. So my Mega Drive collection tends to be boxed with the instructions and even the slightly anal thing of having the hang tab, which is the thing that you would have put it up onto those little sort of hooky shelf things in the shops. When I did want Ghouls and Ghosts, as I say, it's one that I remember, it's one I'd really love to have in my collection, but when I've looked it up on eBay, what they're going for, complete in that condition that, as I say, I would prefer to have, it's very expensive. It's about £55-60 complete in good condition, which is kind of pushing it. Yet, when it came out, it would have been 40 quid. So not far what it is now to buy. So if you can try and somehow wrap your head around that, go back to when you're a kid, to when this came out in 1990, and think that it would have been £40 to buy it. It's sort of, it blows my mind. The Mega Drive, when we were selling them in the market, when we were selling them second hand, not long after that, probably a year or two after that, 18 months, we were selling for $89.99. So you could buy a second-hand Mega Drive for the price of 2 games. So if you bought your system, you're then looking at almost paying half the price of the machine to buy 1 game.
Yeah,
it was crazy. When you start thinking about it, like, wow, were we really doing that? How were we doing that? I must have been robbing old ladies or something, because I wasn't earning money in 1990. How was I buying these games? It's like having a crack habit. You find the way, man. But I don't know how.
Hence the market stall. Hence the shop.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. The second-hand market. I mean, and I think we could even rent. You know, people would borrow them from the video store as well, games, right? You could rent games.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny listening to other people talk about old games, but that seemed to be so much more ubiquitous thing in America than it was over in the UK. There was only one place near me that did rent out games, and they had a very, very, very small selection. It wasn't as big as the rental market is in VHS or anything else. It was tiny in comparison. So you would be very lucky if you could hire the latest game anyway.
Well, it was important to borrow games off your friends as well, right? So
yeah, that's really how it happened. Yeah,
it amazes me really when you think. I mean, playing R-Type for the last episode and thinking of Ghouls and Ghosts, and then thinking nowadays people complain if a game they buy hasn't got 40 hours of gameplay, right? and these games, I was just trying to think, it's like they were such short, even though they were, must be, these games really were like, oh, just one more go. But there's a limit to just how many one more goes you could do. You can't be playing there. We could not have been sat there for like 3 hours in a row playing this game. Whilst today, if someone's playing a modern PlayStation 5 game, Xbox, PlayStation 4, PC game, whatever, you can be sat for long game sessions, and there's so much content, so much storyline. Then there's the multiplayer. So the value for money nowadays, actually, it's probably far superior to the value for money we were getting back when we were teenagers. Yet we would have probably played those games for a short amount of time. And then we didn't have the internet. We didn't have more than 4 TV channels. I don't know.
And if
different times.
If you
bought the wrong game
and you were stuffed, that was it. That was your Christmas. And you opened up My Little Pony, the game, I mean, that was 6 months of your life gone.
Well, hence the importance of the magazines.
Yeah.
And the magazines were so important.
Yeah, which is, I'm sure, another thing we'll end up lamenting. And
well, you weren't playing demos. There were no demos of Megadrive games. You could go, maybe you could go to a shop and play. You could probably play it in a shop.
Yeah.
But there were no demos. Nowadays, there's the freemium business model where lots of games are being downloaded for free, and then you can just play and you can do in-app purchases. So you get to play a game, or there's just a demo of a game. So we were buying games blind, buying magazines, or borrowing games, and then they would be so hard that I just cannot imagine that we could have been playing them for hours. At least not our type. Well, let's see with this.
Yeah, well, yeah, we will see. I think it's like we've mentioned before, and I just sort of hinted at it a minute ago. You only got one game every now and again, so that was all you had. So you kind of had to get good at it, or you just didn't play it, and you did swap it with your mate. I mean, that's something that you sort of not doing so much now, particularly if you're downloading it. Then obviously that's it, you're stuck. But back then you were swapping games, and there's me talking about Ghouls N Ghosts coming out and me looking forward to it and blah blah blah. I wasn't the one who got it. I was around my mate's house and it turned up. He's the one who ordered it. That's where I played. I played Ghouls N Ghosts at somebody else's house on their Megadrive. I didn't have it when it came out.
Well, that's the other thing, the spectator sport of these games of your mates laughing at you, just dying again and again and again. You're useless.
Yeah, they've been playing it 8 hours before you turned up.
So maybe this is a good point where we can good moment where we can just pause, go off and play the game, and come back.
Yes, I'm itching to. So yeah. Press pause along with us, chaps, if you want to. Dig out the game, play it, and then come back and press unpause, if that's a word, and see whether you agree with our feelings. And we're back. Thank you to those of you who pressed pause and joined in and went and played the game. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And for those of you who didn't and are just carrying on listening, well, you can listen to me and Chris because we did go and play it. And I think I'll hand over to Chris and ask him where he played this lovely game on.
I played Ghouls N Ghosts on the Megadrive. Emulated, in this case.
Yeah. And go on. How did you get on playing Ghouls N Ghosts on the Megadrive?
Oh, and it's just as difficult as R-Type, or even more. I think it's even more infuriating than R-Type because it promises so much. It promises to be such a fun game. It still looks good. It's just fun, but it's just so difficult. What did you play on?
The same. Yeah, as I mentioned in the part 1 of this podcast, it's one of those ones I haven't got, and I think I said at the beginning of this that I wish that it was one that I had, but that it was too expensive. And now I'm glad I don't have it, and I don't want to buy it because I agree it's so flipping hard. But unlike R-Type, with R-Type, there was still that love for it. There was something about R-Type. But this, the whole point of this podcast is it's still Spectrum days. Are we playing these games? Are we having those memories come back to us from all those years ago? Yeah, I want to play that game again. I haven't played it for a million years, which this is one of those. I haven't played it for a long time, probably since the 90s. And I am actually quite disappointed because it is a game that I loved and was so excited when it came out. And as I mentioned before, we were anticipating it coming out. It got 92% in Mean Machines, which was the magazine that we were all really into and believed and listened to. And when we did play it, it was great. And I remember it being great. I remember it being hard. But playing it now, I just couldn't get anywhere on it. And I think if anyone is actually watching the YouTube video of this and not just the podcast, you'll see the footage and you will just be laughing at me dying over and over and over again. And I hate it.
How far did you get?
I think it's level 5, but my eyes and hands were bleeding that I found it difficult to count what actual level it was.
And that's the last level, right? 5.
No, I think there's one more, because it comes up, doesn't it? Anyone who's not played it, when you get to the end of the level or you die or whatever, it sort of shows you how far you've gone. It's almost taunting you. It's almost said, "Ha ha! You've died and you've got still this far to go. Ha, try again."
Well, you did far better than me. I got to the very beginning of level 2, where I was just repeatedly killed by some flying, bouncing turtles that are protected by their shells until they become vulnerable for a few seconds once they leave their shells. And then the game's got this fantastic thing, which you think at the beginning, oh yeah, this is great. If you get a power up or if you change your weapon, you get to keep it even after you've died, even once you've used a continue and you've still got it. But that means occasionally, at the beginning of level 2 at least, it will give you a different kind of weapon. There's one which you throw kind of blue ball then it goes across the floor and
like
kills things on the floor.
Molotov cocktail sort of thing.
Yeah. You've got an axe. By the way, I think in part 1 I said you throw swords, but you seem to throw a lance, which producer John remembered very well. Yeah, he remembered that. He should be speaking. He remembers all these things better than we do. But yeah, so sometimes even the axe is like, which is awesome on level 1, but at the beginning of level 2, because the axe goes slightly diagonally, it often then misses these turtles once they do walk on the floor when they're vulnerable. So when they're vulnerable, you can't even kill them because your axe is going off in the air. So it's really, really annoying that you're getting this like, whoa, I've got a new weapon. This is great, much better than the lance. And there I am hankering for a lance. And by the way, this is all in practice level. Explain how that works, Phil.
It taunts you the entire way. I mean, at the beginning, you've got very few options, which games back there did have very few options. You might be lucky to get a sound test and maybe 1 or 2 player and maybe some options. And all you get on this, I think, is 1 or 2 player, and you can choose between practice and is it normal, the other one, or hard, or something horrible like that. So 2 options, practice. Oh yeah, I'll put it on. I couldn't remember back in those days whether that's how we played it or not. I have no idea. I can only assume we must have done, because it was so hard on practice. I can't believe we played it on the other one. And the bottom right hand of the screen, as if you're watching the footage now or YouTube video of this, you'll see it taunts you with that word in big lovely orange letters, practice. It's like it's saying, ha 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 ha, this is really, really hard, and you're not even playing the real game. You suck. Go and do something else.
Absolutely. Again, same with R-Type. There's no intro. There's no story. Does it even mention you're called Arthur? We only know that because we've read around the game on the back of the package, I guess. Arthur seems to reach the Netherlands, maybe. There's so many windmills in level 2. I always... as soon as you say Arthur, King Arthur, is this King Arthur? What's happening? So you don't really know what's happening. Not that it matters. The storyline is not important. And I think this is where it's a game where it doesn't make me hanker for the past. Playing R-Type last week is like, oh yeah, great. I haven't played a shoot 'em up for a long time. Playing this, and I've already mentioned Broforce, it's kind of like, well, Broforce just does all this much better and much more fun. So if I was to choose what to spend my time on, I'd prefer to play Broforce than this.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking off mic about the difficulty and how it ramps up. Well, or games usually ramp up in difficulty and perhaps start off a little bit easier. But even in this, there's enemies that appear from nowhere. They're sort of like zombie ghosts, aren't they? Because they sort of come out of the ground. They can come out from behind things. They can jump down from above down onto the level you're on, or come up and down the ladders that you're using to go up and down the levels. So sort of no matter where you are, you're constantly being attacked. And his style of jump is you jump and you've got no control over it. It's nothing like Mario or Sonic or anything else. You jump and it's just an arced jump, and that's it. That's all you've got.
Well, it's a great example of insanity, because you just, I think insanity is defined by just repeating the same thing again and again, even if it's bad for you. I think, right? That's exactly what the enemies have fixed patterns. But I don't know if it's my old brain, but I'm just not capable of remembering those patterns. And I would run exactly to where the turtle's going to drop on me every single time. And then when you do, not when you die, when you lose your armor, your character Arthur flickers in and out, typical kind of game mechanic, flickers, and you're then invulnerable. You're invincible for the next few seconds. It's like, oh yeah, great! I'm gonna run as far as I possibly can whilst I'm invincible. And then it always, of course, it runs out just at the wrong moment. But if you had recorded what I was doing exactly the same thing again and again and again and again. It's so insane. It's insane.
Yeah, it's one of those games that's got that thing that I call sort of magnetic. So you're drawn to that same danger. It's almost as if you can't help but do exactly the same thing every single time. It's almost unavoidable. You know it's coming. It's so frustrating. That bit that you're talking about with the turtles, they're like rocks, aren't they? Almost like rocks that are raining out of the sky, but secretly they're turtles. So sometimes you don't know whether they're going to land and turn into a turtle. So you move as if you're avoiding it, but it then drops in front of you and walks towards you, and you just run straight into it. It just teases you.
After doing the same thing 30 times, you realize they're always doing it. It's not like sometimes they're just following a fixed pattern. There's not even any randomness to it, I don't think. I mean, talking about the difficulty and the balancing, and it makes me think. Of course, we've mentioned, Phil said various times, this was an arcade game. So this was originally in an arcade, a place that you would go and you would put coins into the game to play it. There would be a big machine and you would put coins in and you would play it. So those games developers, or maybe not the games developers, maybe a commercial arm, the business manager, someone, there was a lot of money being invested into these games. They would have to then make these cabinets. They would then rent the cabinets out to arcades, to sometimes, at least in the UK, to pubs or places where you could play a game. Then the people in those places would then want to make money back, and they would have to pay for the rent. I don't know how the revenue share. I don't know how that part of the business exactly worked. Now it's made me curious to think about how it did work. But the whole thing would be that the people would be playing the game, putting in those 10 pence. I don't know if it would be 10 pence in those days, but to play a game, 3 lives, 10 pence. And then you could continue by putting another 10 pence in once you've died, and you'd have 10 seconds to put more money in. So the whole idea, at least the commercial idea of the game, I'm sure the games developers wanted to make fun games, but then you have to make money back on all that investment so you can make other fun games. So they had to think about, well, how difficult do I make the game? Because you didn't want someone staying on that machine, hogging it for many minutes, so you couldn't get someone else to pay. But if you made it too hard, maybe that same person wouldn't pay again. So you've got to get balancing. And I'm presuming in those days that game balancing would just be something that only the developers could do, and perhaps friends they would invite in, and some people they would invite in whilst they were developing the game to test it and play test it and change the balancing. Oh, let's change this, let's change that. But once they'd made the cabinet, once they'd made the motherboard and put it all out there, I presume there was very little tweaking that they would do. Now, nowadays, if you make a mobile phone game, or almost any game nowadays, you know that basically you can then of course, do internal play testing. Games designers will get the balancing. They'll use their skills, their knowledge, their intuition to try and make it as fun and as engaging as possible. But you've got to make sure that the retention is high enough so that you can finally monetize. You need people to keep coming back. There's so many business models. I don't want to get into too many, but if you're playing a free game with advertising on a mobile phone, it's quite similar to the arcade experience. So there'll be hyper casual games, which are very, very, very difficult because the developers need you as a player to fail many times so that you'll see another whole advert, an interstitial advert. So you want to see more, they want to show you more advertising to make money off that free game. So that's kind of what it was in the arcade. The developers needed the people to fail fairly quickly so that someone else could put more money in. But I fear that maybe they just got the balance right, but they were quite blind. These arcade cabinets weren't feeding those metrics, the data back to them, and they couldn't tweak the game. The only way you could tweak a game that I know of, at least when it got to then the Megadrive, would be using the kind of action replay cartridge. And that was something that we would use with the consoles at home to kind of hack or cheat these games, sometimes make them easy. So sorry, Phil, I just went off on one then on how difficult this game is. How nowadays
this game makes you feel, man.
Yeah, nowadays, yeah, I would want to tweak and change that game. You would soft launch it, so still thousands of people would play the game before it went into general circulation. And even when games are in circulation, they can still be updated. And I talk mostly from my experience in iPhone, Android kind of games, but all modern games, console, PC, it's the same now. They're constantly feeding back to the developers how people are playing, how far they're getting, and it's all about that adapting. I mean, if you play FIFA, or if you play many games, you might think, oh, that's it, I'm just going to give up. And then miraculously, in that next game, you win. Now, is that because you just got better, or is it because the game has decided to tweak something in real time to let you kind of win or so you can continue? You know, that kind of sort of stuff goes on.
I mean, I think culturally, listening to what you're saying, that culturally there's a few things that make games like this hard. It's coming from Japan, and in Japan, and still to this day, they prefer the harder type game, the game that like the bullet hell type games that we mentioned when we were talking about R-Type and things like that. So there certainly is that cultural difference, and any arcade game coming from over there, most of them were along this level, like R-Type, like this one. I mean, that was kind of the norm and to be expected. But I think I mentioned probably in the first part of the podcast that Sega actually made this version for the Mega Drive in-house. And I can't help but feel, because of the push, the raison d'etre for the Mega Drive was to say you can now have the arcade experience in the home. I think they took that very literally and just made the game exactly as it is in the arcade. I quickly played, to remind myself, the arcade version of this, again emulated, and it is almost identical. There's a few graphical fidelity in the back of the sort of trees in that stage of the sort of wind and things. You know, you see a few more leaves blowing around. It does look a little bit better, and the sound's a little bit different, but it's almost identical. But the actual game is exactly the same. I mean, Sega really did just put the arcade game in the home. They didn't make any changes. And also the other thing that I'd say is, don't forget, games back then weren't very big. And actually, this game, much like R-Type, if you could play it well, I reckon you could do it in 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I'm sure someone will let us know. I'm sure someone's done a run of it. I'm sure, you know, these speed runners. It's not a big game, you know. There's not a lot in it.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, you're right. Thinking of the context for us, if we go back, try and travel back in time, and for us, these things were totally new. You're right. You would be able to go, at least in my experience, you'd go to an arcade before I was 17, or you probably go to arcades once or twice a year on holiday. right? You'd be a
If you're
holiday
lucky. Yeah.
destination.
Yeah.
So for us to be able to play a game like that on a home console, home computer was amazing, right? So that's why it's getting such high scores. Like, whoa, this is arcade perfect. But it'd be interesting as we play other games that weren't arcade ports, and we'll see how the gameplay changes in line with what the business objectives were, I guess, because then as you get that's where we'll get into games for the Spectrum or Commodore Amiga or Mega Drive even, where now the objective is to perhaps give players value for money, a longer experience, something that's got reviews. The ways that people would view games would be a bit more mature, and it'll start getting closer to what we see now, although still very, 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 very different to the kind of types of games we got now. But you're right, you've got to think of the things in context. But I was just like, this game could have just been so much more fun. I just think they could have made it that little bit easier, made it a little bit more fun. And my hypothesis is that they could have even made a little bit more money in the arcade. It would have been that I would have put 10 pence in. You would have died, maybe continue, and then you're like, oh, get lost. I'm not putting more money in this. So if they made it a little bit easier, if they made it a little bit easier, maybe they would have got 50 pence out of me. 50.
But they were thinking of the Japanese youth who were there, who were, much better gamers than us. And anyone who's ever played Mario Kart Online or any of these games, I guarantee you are being beat by someone from Japan. They usually come first. And I'm not saying that as a joke. They do like that style of game, and that's why they made them. They like that difficult level of difficulty.
Yeah. We'd have to look into the industry now and see, well, how many developers are Western developers, and which kind of modern techniques have kind of won the business side, right? Because what kind of types of games? I mean, games are much easier in a way. But yeah, it's an interesting thought. Interesting to think about why games were so difficult, and there must be a myriad of reasons. You're absolutely right.
I think size, again, just going back to saying that it was a short game, certainly when it came out, price-wise, cartridges are obviously very, very expensive, and might go in the leap from 8-bit to 16-bit. Cartridge prices went up. And that game was, although we got it fairly late, was it might even have been a release title elsewhere around the world, but it certainly came a bit later for us, not much later. That was probably like a 2 meg or a 4 meg cartridge. But down the line, you started getting much bigger cartridges. I think Streets of Rage 2 was like the first 8 meg or 16 meg cartridge. It was massive in comparison. And games were then bigger. They were broader in scope and were longer. And
Were the cartridges physically bigger?
No, just the amount of information they could fit in them. Well, actually, no, that's not true. No, they were. No, you had what was that 3D racing game, Virtua Racer, which had the DSP chip in it, which is sort of their equivalent of the Super FX chip that Super Nintendo had. That came on a massive cartridge. So yeah, actually cartridges did vary in size, but that was much, much, much later on.
Well, also if you think the Master System, there was the possibility of there was cartridges or cards.
So in the original one, yeah.
So in the Master System, which I presume the games coming on cards, I'm presuming, were smaller.
They were the smaller
arcadey.
Yeah.
What was the motorbike game that we were talking?
Super Hang-On.
No, not on card. Was
Super Hang-On and Safari Hunt were the original built-in games on the Master System. later on. The very, very first Master System, when it came out, only had a built-in game, which was Snail Maze, which you had to press
Yeah.
a series of buttons and then turn the machine on, and it was this Snail Maze game would come on. But the next
Yeah,
pack,
yeah,
the
that one.
main pack that came with a light phaser, was packaged with Safari Hunt and Hang On. I don't think they were physical. I think they were built in, but someone, I'm sure, will correct me on that. But I think it was Hang On, Ghost House, Transbot, and a handful of others came out on card, but also Transbot also came out on cart as well. There was a few that did make the leap from card to cart. I don't know why they did that, but yeah, but the cards, they certainly, speaking from the second-hand market, they just disappeared. We never saw them. I mean, they came and went, and also then the majority of the machines that we saw was the Master System 2, which is the one that I got physical, that I use. The 3D glasses made use of the cart slot, so you actually plugged those into the card slot, and then you plugged the game into the cartridge slot. So there was a few things that could use it, but it was so minimal.
3D glasses for the Master System.
Yeah.
Gosh.
That's going to be difficult to review in a podcast. I don't know how I'd put that into the video. That's going to be very difficult. I think I'll leave that one.
So apart from the game being fiendishly difficult, was there anything you did like about it?
I think it's brilliantly made as a platformer, which was probably what we call it. We already discussed this. What we'd probably call it now is a run and gun, potentially. As a platform game, it looked beautiful. It was, the music was incredible. I can hear it now. I've been humming it. I don't know how long our pause was, all weekend, I think. I've been constantly humming that blooming tune. And those are the things that I remember. I suppose those are the Spectrum days. I suppose those are the rose-tinted glasses. Those are the reasons why I was like, yeah. Let's do Ghouls and Ghosts. Let's play it. I am now quite sad, having played it, that now I don't like it as much as I did, and that is very sad. That is very sad, because it is a game I hold up there as being one of the best of the Megadrive, and showed what the Megadrive could do, and you couldn't do it anywhere else. Sega were quite correct in saying that they brought that arcade experience home, and it did work, and it was much better than something like Altered Beast, which was another one of those arcade games that was big and colourful and had big sprites and looked amazing, but was terrible in comparison.
I bet anyone listening remembering Altered Beast thinking it was a great game. Let's challenge them to play it.
They're wrong. They're just wrong. It was rubbish. It was rubbish then. And it's rubbish now. But at the time, see, that's the weird thing. You had Altered Beast and you had a game like Ghouls and Ghosts out at basically the same time. Which would you play? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Which would you pick?
Ghouls and Ghosts.
Yeah, Ghouls and Ghosts every time, but that's what's so sad. Now that I've spent a weekend playing it, gritting my teeth and breaking my hands and a controller and trying to video footage for this YouTube video that I hope people are watching. God.
I don't know if I had the controller configured incorrectly, but I felt that they put the jump and
yeah, that was it. That was my problem. That was my problem too.
I felt like the jump and the fire buttons were on the wrong. They were in the wrong order. They were in the wrong place.
I mean, see, that's classic. So we were even playing it emulated. You could actually reconfigure it. You couldn't do that back in the Mega Drive days.
Yeah,
you just had to play it.
Well, you could. Yeah, I mean, on practice mode, you got infinite continues. So I literally, like Friday evening, I like literally said, I'd reached level 2 pretty quickly. I decided, okay, I'll use a continue, pause, and then I just turned the screen off, leaving the Raspberry Pi just running. And then I came back to it the day after, thinking I'll be fresh.
You can just do a save state, don't you? You didn't need to just leave it.
I left it. Sorry, World Resources.
Yeah, what are you doing?
But no, it was still just terribly difficult. Terribly. And
that's very old school.
What,
leaving the
leaving
console on, going to school, playing a game in the morning and doing really well. I'll have to leave it on while I'm at school and hope it's on when I come back.
Yeah, leave a note. Don't disconnect.
Yeah, right. Your
Don't
mum's
turn
done
off.
mum's done the hoovering and unplugged it. Bugger.
But that is my overall feeling is this. It could have been just so great, and I'm just a bit annoyed that they didn't make it more fun. Or maybe even if you do a port, couldn't they have just done like, okay, here's practice mode, here's the arcade modes, and here's our, like they do nowadays. Do they call it? I can't remember what they call it, because there's often games which are like hardcore mode, and there's, what do they call the easiest mode nowadays? Which is the one
hand mode.
Yeah, which is the one I normally play. It's like, I don't have enough time in my life. My life is challenging enough with other things. Why do I need to be just punished? I want to play a game for fun. I want to play a game for fun.
Controller's never configured right, is it? That's the problem.
No, but that is the problem.
I can't believe you're playing the blooming thing on a Raspberry Pi where you could be saving it and save states, playing it slow motion, rewinding it, and it's like, no, I'll leave this on overnight. I've got level 2.
Hey,
leave it on.
I am trying to emulate what it was like back in the days.
Yeah.
The Spectrum days.
Honest of you. Very honest of you. You should put some 10p's in the back of it as well. Yeah, I took it into a really noisy room with a load of people smoking and drinking. That's what I did. Really get that pub atmosphere.
I put a heater behind my flat screen monitor to emulate the heat coming off the tube TV.
See, all these things you've got to do just to make Ghouls and Ghosts better. Everyone will be hating us listening to us hating on it. I'm sorry, I used the hate twice there in the same sentence in 3 words in a row. But honestly, I challenge anyone who didn't bother pressing pause and going and playing it, honestly, and hasn't played it. I think obviously it's got its fans, and I am one of them. I do still consider myself a fan of the game, but I am disappointed by it, having played it now. And I do challenge anyone who remembers it from back then. If you do think we're wrong, you think, no, it was amazing, and you can stand having your life ruined by finding out that it's more annoying than you remember it to be, go and play it and let us know. Tell us what you think.
Play it on Halloween for that, right? The real nightmare experience.
And remember to configure your pad.
So we've played 2 arcade games in a row, and we can argue till the cows come home about if the balancing was correct to make money back in those days. But maybe next time we should really explore a game made for home computing. Straight to the Spectrum, perhaps. Well,
I think we should look at one of those mascots of the early days of the Spectrum. And there really is only one, really, well before sort of Manic Miner and that lot came along. I think that first one that everyone remembers is Horace. With Horace Goes Skiing. We had 3 adventures, I think, 2 or 3 other adventures. So I think we should probably look at that. I certainly remember it. I know everyone else here does, all 3 of us, in fact, remember. And I expect everyone listening now is nodding sagely and going, yes, Horace Goes Skiing. That was easy. I'm glad they've picked an easy one this time. You can email us at hello@spectrumdays.com, and you can contact us on Twitter @SpectrumDaysPod. And you can also find us on YouTube just by looking up Spectrum Days.